So welcome back to the show, and here I have now the privilege of having Brenda Adelman on the show. Hi Brenda, how are you?
Hi, how are you? I'm really good here in LA.
Yeah, you're in LA. I am here in Dublin, and I see that the weather is really nice in LA.
It's usually nice in LA. It doesn't change very much, but today it's a little gray, a little bit, but I think it'll burn off.
Oh, you know what? It's like in Dublin. It never changed very much, but here is grey and it will stay grey, I think.
That's too bad. Oh, yeah, you get a little used to the wonderful weather in Los Angeles, that's for
Yeah,
sure.
that's really great. Yeah. So Brenda, thank you very much for coming on this show, and thank you very much for being here. Um, Really, I think it's what your message, what you have to convey, and who you are is a gift for the listeners of this show. Because it's about being authentic, about living your life, about taking the options that are open for you in front of you so that you can really design what you want in your life. So thank you very much for being here. Really appreciate this.
Sure.
So when I can tell us a little bit about who you are and because have several facets here, and I know that your life story is very important, but you are an actress, you're doing many different things. So it would be interesting just to know who you are here.
So, well, I'm very, very passionate about teaching people how to forgive. In my life, I say it's the unforgivable because in 1995, my father shot and killed my mother. And quickly after that, moved in with my aunt, my mother's older sister. And, and it just devastated me, pulled the rug out from under me. And I spent, I'd say, 3 to 5 years in a really bad depression and just, thinking that I loved my dad so much. So I was caught in this inner turmoil of I love him, I hate him, I love him, I hate him, having him in my life, then cutting him out of my life. And the real turning point for me was when, well, there were several, but one of the turning points for me was realizing that the hatred I had inside was hurting me, wasn't hurting him. And so, for example, I would cut him out of my life to, I thought, for self-care, but he would be alive in my head. And so I did some deep inner work, did some energy work, and then went back to school to get a master's degree in spiritual psychology. In that program, I learned how to take that anger and express it in a healthy way, which also then led me to looking at my own anger toward myself. Like, how could I trust anybody again? I trusted my father. I was so stupid. I have all these judgments. Then I forgave all those judgments, learned how to forgive, truly forgive in my heart, just not in my head. And then also work on that with my aunt who married him. And I also have a one-woman show about my life story. I was an actress at the time. And so also in the beginning worked my process just in an exercise and acting class, inhabiting the different characters in my life and realizing, my father is more than what he did. My mother is more than what happened to her.
No, okay, so Brenda, well, I'm not really sure what to say here because the story must be really terrible for you, and especially for a daughter with a dad, the relationship is very special. And but what you have done since then is quite remarkable because you have really taken this message and tried to make something out of it and try to help other people.
Yeah, once I really, I took time off. I put the show up originally the first time in 2000. And again, when I started it, I didn't set out to write a one-person show. I was an actress already, so I literally just set out to do an exercise and acting class to kind of maybe exercise my demons. Or that the exercise was actually supposed to be something personal and authentic. And I felt at that point, that I was hiding. I wasn't talking to people about what happened in my life. I was filled with shame. So that acting exercise was my first step to just kind of be seen. And instead of receiving judgment from people, I got so much love, and I had people coming up to me sharing about things in their lives that they were ashamed about and they had been too frightened to talk about until they saw what I was talking about. And that's what gave me the impetus to create it into a one-person show. And then I took time off and went back and went to that spiritual psychology program. And at that same time, I learned what a healthy boundary was versus a hard boundary, which I call a hard boundary as cutting someone out of your life. I learned the healthy boundary, which is still, you're able to have someone out of your life, but with love. You send love to them so that when you're thinking about them, you're not getting all crazy inside. And during that time, I took my dad to court for wrongful death. When I did, I used all these techniques of forgiving, letting go, expressing my real feelings, and then at that point, something shifted, and it was no longer about my story. It was about helping other people on their path.
Yeah, but how can you do this? How do you say, having a healthy boundary, that's your term. But how can you send love to somebody who did something so terrible for your family? Because it's your full life.
Right.
How old were you when this happened? Because we know it is 1995.
I was an adult.
Okay.
But I'll say it like that. It was 15 years ago, but I was already out of the house and living. I had just moved to California from New York. I was out of New York about 9 months when this happened. So, I definitely was an adult, but I was so codependent with my parents. My role in my family was being the peacemaker. So then when my mom died, there was a part of me that was like, why did I leave? Why didn't I stay back there? Why didn't I go back there on vacation? I could have stopped it, which is natural. People feel guilty. Until one day my brother said, what if you would have gone back and gotten caught in the middle of their fight, and something could have happened to you. So that's also one of the things I teach is that, so many people are in regret about what could have happened, what should have happened, what would have happened if you made a different choice, but we have no idea what would have happened, In that case, maybe my mother wouldn't have been saved, but I would have been shot, as my mom was shot, So.
Yeah, you don't really know what may have happened, but it's still the guilt that you carry with you all these years after, I guess, that it's...
let me address the thing that you said about how can you send love. What I realized, I over these years, it's been 15 years, is that was one of the big missing pieces was sending love to the person that I was so angry at. And the reason it's so important is that I use discernment, and I can say, well, my father shot my mother in the head and killed her. That's a terrible thing. That's, you're not supposed to do that, and it's murder, it's this, it's that. It was violent. The act was. But where the love comes is instead of, let's see, how do I say this? I'm not ever condoning what he did. I'm not saying, what he did was wonderful, all is good. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is what he did was wrong in the realm of right and wrong, which that's a whole other topic. But, pretty much you can say that's wrong what he did. But I had to find a way for myself to transform every time I think about him in my consciousness that I hate him, he's wrong, how horrible he is, because I was just hurting myself. So it's a practice of bringing things up to awareness, because oftentimes people have anger towards someone in their life that's not in their present area, and they think, oh, that person's not affecting them. But what I learned is that when I cut my dad out of my life, I'd say, well, he's not in my life, so he's not affecting me. But then something would remind me of him, and I would go to pieces. And so I was letting him live and in me and re-wounding myself. And so that's why it's like being really conscious of how someone's affecting you. And I'll let me tell a way that how I healed this. So I took a picture of my dad out, and I put it on on a dresser that I had. And I consciously every day would look at that picture and say, how do I feel? Do I hate him? Am I angry at myself? Am I depressed? And every day for 30 days, I would measure how do I feel when I see him. And this way I could see when I was healing. Because after a while, when I'm bringing this conscious awareness coupled with forgiving my judgments about him and the situation, every day it would get less and less. And then maybe one day I'd be so angry again, but the key was that I was bringing all this stuff to consciousness that I could heal it and apply loving to it.
So bringing it all to consciousness, that seemed to be really the path that you needed to take to heal yourself. but more so the consciousness of you hurting yourself, as far as I understand. You're feeling against your dad, but also you yourself.
Taking 100% responsibility for my feelings, my suffering, my happiness. That's the only thing we have control over, is that, we can be in pain, but the suffering we can control. It doesn't have to be as bad. If we don't deny what's happening, if we don't suppress it, it doesn't have to be so bad. And in my case, because I was not the type of person who lashed out with my anger. Some people are. It would go inward with me, so I would go into depression. So it was really important to also let this anger out in a really healthy way. And one way of doing that would be like free-form writing, and in a healthy way. Not doing it for more than 2 hours at a time, and then letting it go after that, but really writing about everything that got me so angry. Because otherwise, I had considered myself a nice person. Otherwise, it would be like, well, who am I to think these things? And when I was in that state, I was really in denial. I had to get it out. And, that's what I experience is people, if they don't get their anger out, then it seeps out in like passive-aggressive ways, or, by cutting down their, shutting down their heart, things like that.
It's also quite funny in a certain way that when I saw some small snippet of your show, and it's quite a funny show, in fact.
Oh yeah,
it is very very funny. And
I
I was to tell you the truth here. I knew that we will talk about forgiveness, and but I didn't really do too much work, because I'm more letting whatever flows needs to flow, because I think it's the best way of serving the people who are going to listen to this show. And then I saw this small snippet, and I found it funny, and then I heard about your story, and I said, wow, that's kind of really incredible. So how do you manage to turn something so dramatic into something so funny, and sometimes to be able to step back and look at what is for what is, and then to be able to say, yes, this is done now, and now I have my life to live, which is...
Yeah. Well, that's the whole thing. Once I was able to find humor, I really knew that I was on the way to healing. It was no longer, I have to do this show, I have to talk about this so I can heal. It was, oh, I have perspective now. Okay, I can see the irony. And the humor in the show is very ironic, for the most part. And the first part of the show is so funny because, this is the whole thing. My family was not just what happened the night that my mom was killed. It was, growing up in Brooklyn with this Jewish wannabe Italian father, and then my mother, who was eclectic and took me all over the world with her and was like, kind of like the Lady Gaga of her time in Brooklyn, and then me being a combination of this, like, tough father and this artist's mother in this, neighborhood in Brooklyn. So that was funny in itself. But for, good 4 years after my mom died, I couldn't find humor in anything. So when I started to find the humor again is when I knew I was healing. And that's the whole thing for people in their lives to, it's a great point, a marking point where they can say, oh, there really is a different perspective. Or for me, I think when I found the humor too, it meant that, my witness was there. There was the part of me that wasn't just reacting to everything in life, that was able to see things from a different perspective. And that's the other, I was talking before about how, it's wrong that my father took my mother's life. But then on another level, if you look at everything in life as perfect and everything happening for a reason, from that context, there's no right and wrong. And I've found that living from a place of knowing there's different perspectives for everything is much more, just creates more expansiveness in my life. It takes me out of being a victim. And that's the most important thing, one of the most important things.
Yeah, and I know that this is what we are taught, and this is also how I try to live, but okay, I had my dramatic part of my life too, but not as dramatic as yours, and that's really where it's a bit difficult here to relate to to what you had. But I know every pain, every suffering is personal, right. And it is.
That's what I've certainly learned over the years. It's like what happened for me was very dramatic, but betrayal is universal. Loss is universal.
Yeah, and
you
this
know?
is exactly where I would like to go a little bit with you, because if you are, let's say, cheated by a husband or wife, in my case, a wife, how how can you really forgive this? How can you find some peace in what happened and forgive the person for what happened?
Okay, so there's realizing, well, you know what I found a lot with people who cheat is that often it's a way to get out of a marriage when someone's not courageous enough to speak their issues. It's kind of like also when people really want to leave their jobs, they hate their jobs, and then they get fired and they're so pissed off. But it's like that actually gives you, the ability to do what you were meant to do. So the same thing with cheating. I think people have a choice. They can realize that it gives them the ability to move on. They can. This is the thing. If you hold on to your anger toward a spouse for cheating, and I think it's normal to have a feeling of being betrayed and being angry and stuff like that for a while. Just like when someone dies, you have a grieving process. With a marriage, you're grieving the hope that you had for the marriage, how you thought it would be. If you have kids, you're grieving this bond that you thought you would always have together. So it's natural to have the grieving process around marriage, and also the anger. My whole point is you want to let go of it, knowing that everybody is on their own path and that nobody owes anybody anything. Because yes, you've taken your vows and things like that, and one person has betrayed them. To me, it's like, that's great. Now you know that that person is someone that's not going to honor and respect you. They're not even honoring and respecting themselves. It's just a little bit different perspective. And as the person who's been cheated on, you want to then make choices where you're honored and respected and not betrayed again. And it's really hard to attract someone wonderful if you're holding on to the past and the anger and the betrayal from the other person. And what you want to do, actually, the way to heal it is to look at that anger and that betrayal toward that person and then look within, because I believe everything is a projection of us in some way and the power lies in us. You want to look within and say, where have I betrayed myself? And then forgive that judgment. And so you're not forgiving what happened, you're forgiving the judgment in your consciousness. So it would be, I forgive myself for judging myself as betraying myself when, and then you'd look at an experience of when that was. It could be in the very relationship you were in. I forgive myself for judging myself as betraying myself when I saw something wasn't right, but I didn't address it. It's for me, I feel like so much having to do with cheating in relationships is people not having enough courage to speak up, and then instead of having that anger, when you transform that anger toward compassion for the other person, what you can find is compassion coming your way from everybody, because then you're living in a place of compassionate people. You just want to be around them, and that's what you end up attracting.
Yeah, and you're right, and you're kind of right when you're saying, well, you're really right when you say this. It is really when I did not wanted to speak up, and it was kind of a sabotage, sabotaging the relationship, allowing this to happen, because I also at some level wanted it to end. But
that's great, because that's the 100% responsibility, which people don't take because they think it's going to be, too hard. It's so unconscious usually to take responsibility for that. But the key to the freedom is saying, oh, what's my responsibility here? It doesn't look like I have any because of the situation. But that is actually the key. And then forgiving that judgment. Oh, I forgive myself for judging myself as a terrible person because I didn't want this to work. Or I forgive myself for judging myself because I didn't speak up and I should have. And then reframing it to, the truth was you were doing the best you could, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, completely, yeah. And I was, and I was kind of very good in my role of victim. I was probably a good actor also.
Oh, so was I. I had to. Oh, of course. And the thing with the victim role is I think we're really taught much more to be victims than to take responsibilities for our lives. At least in America, I feel that way. And, so you'll have people jump on the bandwagon. Oh, my God, your wife cheated on you? Oh, that's horrible. Oh, my God, your father did that? Oh, how horrible. And I found that in that place of victimhood, and there were so many people jumping on that bandwagon, I was so disempowered. I was depressed. I wasn't moving forward in my life. I wasn't creating the life I wanted. I could barely get out of the house. And I had lots of people at the same level of how bad everything was. And once I shifted and forgave myself for being a victim and learned that I didn't have to be a victim, oh my gosh, my life changed completely. Like, I started doing my show regularly. I met someone that I'm in love with. I have wonderful friends in my life. It was from moving out of being a victim.
It's quite interesting what you say here about how other people saw you and how they kind of reinforce your role as a victim. That's really, really interesting, because I found that before it was the same for me. It was the kind of people around me, and I allowed this to happen also, but that kept me into a certain role with a certain mask. And when I decided to choose that now that's not the life I wanted to have, and other friends came in my life, from where I don't know, but they came.
Yeah.
And now it's even difficult for me to relate to the first ones, because I don't want this. I don't want this life where it's not authentic.
That's exactly what happened to me too. So you have to know there are consequences, because I believe we're in a vibrational universe too, right? So if I'm raising my vibration, because of victim consciousness, it's just the way I can relate to it is when I was living in that place, I was contracted, I was small, the vibration was lower. It's like you just don't meet with the same people. You don't, if some people are like everything's so terrible, blah 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 blah. And that's not your belief system anymore, you're going to part ways, and it's going to be hard to stay together. Now, that's not to say that I don't have contact with some people, but I take those relationships for what they are. I don't see those people that much. And to me, the consequence, again, it goes back to nobody owes anybody anything. I can have loving for some of those people that were in my life back then and not see them, and because there's no obligation. But what I found is naturally, there were friends that were attracted into my life when I was going through that time that weren't people that I knew from before. They're not around anymore because they were, for a season. I don't feel like I, particularly want to talk to them or something like that anymore. I'm sure it's just like a parting of ways. Again, it's letting go of those bonds, or that anybody owes anybody anything. I think you just change ways. And now, I have friends that are similar to, they have the same beliefs as me as far as it's really important to me, taking 100% responsibility for my life. That's what's important, that and seeking truth. And I believe in pretty much I believe in the good and trying always to find compassion for things and people.
So when you say really taking 100% responsibility, and you also said this before in a different way, that what happened with your dad, and also maybe what happened with my ex-wife, also with the job and the clients I lost and everything at some stage in my life made something crash. I think, and I would like to have your opinion here, it is really to force us to move in the direction of our purpose, to teach people something.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and it's interesting because it sounds like you really lost almost everything too. That's what happened to me. I just lost my world the way I knew it, the way I knew it to be, and I can say without a shadow of a doubt that if my mother had not have died the way she did, I would not be on my path. I would not be on my mission or my purpose, because I was living for my family. I was living for them. I was trying to keep the peace, like I said, that was my role in my family, and I didn't even know who I was. I didn't look within. I didn't know there was a within to look, or that there was a spirit, that moved through everything. So I agree with that.
Yeah, it's funny when you say I didn't know that there was a within to look in. I was exactly the same, and I was looking outside and say, I can't believe that everything is just happening to me.
Right.
How can I deserve all of this? Or how can I attract all of this?
But, right, or deserve. I mean, that's important, though, because I think I felt like I had such low self-esteem, and I felt like unconsciously that's what I deserve. I deserve to, even before my mom died, to be, not really going after my dreams. I just had really low self-esteem. You know, because anytime you're looking outside for validation or what role you should play, it's like how can you be in a powerful place of creating? You know?
Yeah, you can't really, because anyway, if you start to express your power, the people that you are mingling at the time are going to be scared of you, so they want to bring you down because they don't want to go up. Yeah.
Exactly, because they're not ready. So that's, you know, that fear-based mentality versus coming from love and being in the flow.
Yeah, yeah. But you know, when I went to this higher vibration, I just had a call yesterday evening, which is very synchronistic, of an old friend of mine. I didn't talk to her for 6 or 8 months, and she's now ready to hear what I have to say. And it's funny because she's now open and understands and nearly sees that there's hope for her. She was kind of struggling in life also. So over time, we can become the light for other people, and that's beautiful. Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's really, really important. That's funny because I'm working with someone now, a coaching client, who I met in person about a year ago, and she knew about my work, but she was not any place where she wanted to work on forgiveness or anything like that. And now we're working together, and it took her like another, you know, almost a year. But it was, to me, it was so remarkable, the change. You know, it just, yeah, it's so amazing when someone you think is just not, you know, going to be open to change just completely turns around and can work just like, you know, yours did or mine does. You know, and that's not to say that like my life is perfect, but it's really about the response. The response. How do I respond to things now?
Yeah, and it's really, as you say, it's really about response instead of
Reacting.
reacting. Yeah, and that's really a big difference here.
Oh, there you go. You're back.
Yeah, I saw you freezing also. I didn't want to say anything, but that's okay. um,
Okay, but no.
so, but what I'm getting also as you're talking is that before the tragic incident with your dad, is that it looks like your family had a lot of issues. So there was probably abuse or something like this happening. Is it something that you're taking now as your mission in order to help other women or other men?
Um, oh, okay. So you said that there was probably abuse before.
Yeah, there's probably abuse before, and I'm just saying that is it something that now you're taking this as a learning or something that you want to help women or men who are in the
Oh,
same
yeah.
situation?
Oh, yeah. Well, the interesting thing about my family is that there was not any hitting in the family or anything, but guns were always involved, and there was a threat of a gun. And my mom, at one point when I was a teenager, you know, told me that my father put a gun to her head. And when they separated for a short time, and when they got back together, I just thought, well, mom must be crazy. Mom must be lying because my mom wouldn't go back to someone like that. And then after my mom died, I was writing an article or something and talking to someone about how it was domestic violence, and they were like, but there was no hitting. Like, they didn't understand that it was domestic violence to have the threat of guns around. And I didn't really understand it either until I started doing the research. And so people don't realize what's going on in the house. You know, if it's not hitting or someone's not shot, there's still that threat of abuse, and that changes the way people act. You know, when I now have compassion for my mother, you know, again, I had to forgive myself for, you know, misjudging things back then, or I was angry at my mother because of the model she set for me of what it's, you know, how it's okay to be treated or mistreated by someone. And I forgave myself for all that, because what I realized with the threat of a gun and domestic violence is that, you know, the person who is the victim to that is not thinking like me or thinking like, you know, someone who could say, okay, I'm leaving and that's it. They have such low self-esteem. But yeah, I'm really passionate about spreading my message. I've spoke at several coalitions against domestic violence for trainings and also for peace vigils, things like that. And I've done the show. I remember I had a therapist bring her client to one of my shows back in 2006 because this woman just kept going back to her abusive husband, and she was hoping that something would change. And I still remember the end of the show, you know, here the woman had seen my whole show, sees what happened and that my mother was killed. And she comes up to me and says, you know, I'm like your mother. I'm just too loving. And I remember saying to her, but how loving are you to yourself if you don't think you deserve more? And I don't know what happened to her, but that's the whole thing. It's like I wish I could reach more people. Right now, I don't know what it's like in your country, but here there's no funding. They keep cutting the budget for domestic violence places, so I can't get in like I did before. And what's great about the show is it's a teaching tool without preaching. But yeah, I want to reach more people in that community. And kids. I'd love to reach more kids so that when they're dealing with, obsessions, things like that, that they realize when someone's obsessed with you, it's not loving, that's control, things like that.
Yeah, you're completely right. It's control, but also is. I think that no matter how much funding really you have, is as long as people don't have the self-worth and self-love, and they don't feel that they deserve more, they will accept anything. Always they're scared that they may lose something.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I went into a prison last year and spoke with some women, and that was really everything I spoke about was self-forgiveness and self-love, because, that's what it comes out of. A lot of the women in there are there because they've been abused, so it is. It all comes down to self-worth and self-love.
Yeah, and we can wonder at which extent that even we create this abuse also. Not created, but attracted in our life, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, I truly believe, and not in like a new age guilt kind of way, because I don't believe in that, but I do believe that everything is everything in the world is a projection of what we're thinking inside. So, and the tricky part is that it's unconscious often. It comes from patterns growing up, it comes from seeing parents that modeled something that was abusive or something like that. So that's why, again, all my work is about not drudging up the past to bring it with you, but to bring it to consciousness in a loving way, applying loving to all those parts inside that hurt so that you don't have to attract anything like that anymore. I had one abusive boyfriend years ago, and I know it was because of how I was brought up,
How you were brought up, probably, but also how you saw yourself, and probably a lot of things like this, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure. But he, 3 months, and I got him out, thank goodness. Yeah.
But at least now you can offer this gift to many women, but I would say also some men may be abused also, and it's even a similar situation.
Oh, yeah.
But also to your children, I would say.
Yeah. The youngest kids that have seen my show are 7 and 8, and when I was in Hawaii a few years ago, I got to speak for these, it was called Communities, some kind of community at risk program. That wasn't the name of it. But I got to spend a day with 8-year-olds to 15-year-olds who had a really rough time. And it was so wonderful. They really got what I was talking about. And we went around the room at the end, and this 8-year-old said, I learned today that I can forgive my father for abandoning me and my mother. It was just like, because then she won't have to create that pattern of men abandon me, just being conscious of that. It was so great. I love working with kids. Yeah.
Yeah, and they kind of get this. They kind of get this, and when they forgive and understand, they really, really feel it, which is great. I have a real life example here, so I know what it means. And, yeah,
great.
Because my ex-wife moved to another country, so I am now in charge of my daughter all the time.
What? Oh, you just froze. Was it something with your daughter?
Yeah, my ex-wife moved to another country, and I am single dad full time, so 24/7. Which is great. I'm grateful that I am, but at the same time.
So you had to deal with that with your daughter and tell her why, or.
Yeah, we had we went to a very, very rough journey. So in the last year, now it's great, but I would say from January, December 2009 to roughly this January, it was a journey. It was a real, real journey. And we moved from very, very angry and unhappy relationship, really, really angry, to something that is wonderful in 1 year.
With your ex?
No, with my daughter.
Your daughter. Oh, you guys were angry.
But she was very hurt, and I didn't know how to deal with this. I was reacting to life, so I was not who I am now.
Right. So, that's amazing. That's amazing. Think of those tools that you're giving her for the future.
Yeah, she's
That's
getting it. Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah. She's
Yeah.
understanding, and she's now able to create a life that she wants, and she knows that she has power, and she knows that if she has now a relationship with another friend of her that is a little bit difficult, the first question she asks herself is, what do I really think about myself now? And when she understands this, then she shifts this, and then the relationship changes with her friend, and that's
That's
wonderful.
amazing.
Yeah.
How old is she?
Nearly 11.
That's amazing for an 11-year-old,
Yeah.
to be able to take her power back and know that she is the, I say co-creator with spirit of her life instead of being a victim to it. That's great.
But this needed to go to forgiveness for me, for herself, me forgiving myself, herself, her mom. So all this kind of forgiveness here of everybody involved. This
Right.
was one very, very important part.
And it's a journey, there may be more stuff that comes up, and at that point is when, instead of getting angry, like, you thought I worked on this, you're like, oh, it's just another level. This is great. I'm not at square one.
Yeah. There's something that I would like you to explain a bit more. You said before the witness was there or here.
The what?
The witness. You want to talk about your life, and it was like you were looking at your life from above when you said this. And I like this picture because I find this very empowering when I want something in my life and I can see myself from above and see receiving it, and then I know what I need, or not what, but who I need to become in order to attract this. Well, that was kind of interesting what you said. So if you want to elaborate a little bit more what you meant here.
I don't remember where I said it specifically, but I do know that it's like learning that there's different perspectives on everything opens you to choice and opens me to know that, yes, there is someone else I can become and I need to become if I want to go forward. So an example I have is, from my own life, my brother and I didn't speak for 6 years after my mom was killed by my dad, because it's a bigger story, but shortly I'll say because my father is the one who killed our mother. And, 'cause it's my half-brother. And so immediately my brother wanted to take my father to court, and I couldn't. And that's part of the reason we stopped speaking. And I was so devastated because I felt like I lost my whole family in that one night. And I thought, this is my older brother. He's supposed to be there for me. And I lived with that and that anger for so long. And then, I went through all this forgiveness with my dad. And I was still so angry at my brother. I really had displaced a lot of my anger onto him instead of my dad. And then when I decided to take my father to court for wrongful death, I knew that I needed to address this anger toward my brother because we were doing the case together. And so I did all this forgiveness work, self-forgiveness, and like everything I was judged about him, I'm how dare he abandon me? I realized I abandoned him. And then I realized, and I also abandoned myself. I abandoned the loving. And so it's like washing myself over with all this forgiveness, that allowed me to have that perspective and realize, I thought it was so black and white, but it wasn't, because every bit of anger I had toward him, he probably had toward me too. And then I had to go through self-forgiveness, for judging myself. But it was that place of knowing, there's different perspectives on everything. That's when you've got that higher perspective instead of it's just one way.
Yeah,
I don't know if that makes sense.
It makes completely sense, and I really like the way that you said this, because I like the fact that he was angry against me about something and I was angry against him and so on, and it was, I know we're talking about anger here, but it's everything in life, I think, that has this kind of dual thing happening all the time,
I agree, and I do want to say that my brother and I fully reconciled, and he actually invited me to do my one-woman show, to do my show in Vienna at a huge international theater festival that he ran there in 2007. And this is from 6 years not speaking, hating each other. So the power of forgiveness is so incredible.
So you are claiming here, well, not claiming, but you are saying that it's because you forgave him completely from your heart that he came back to you.
I believe so.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I heard about this before, and I believe this too, but I want just you to say this to listeners again, because it's not only you and me here having a conversation here, but it's also other people listening to to this show, and it's very, very important that they hear this message, that you be able to forgive anybody in your life that is holding you back, whether they're still alive or not.
Yes, and there's different levels of forgiveness. I forgave my dad, and I never saw him again. I forgave my brother, and my brother and I reconciled. And it was his son that was 7 who sat in the audience, for the show. So, forgiveness can look, different ways. It doesn't necessarily mean you have someone back in your life, but sometimes it does. Because, with my brother, there are so many people I've met over the years who aren't speaking to siblings and this and that. And I'm not saying you should if there was really a reason not to. But sometimes if you actually look at your stuff and forgive your stuff, you'd be amazed at how the other person will look differently and show up differently in your life. It happens in relationships too, love relationships too.
But that's the fact of forgiving somebody in our life, whoever they are. And even if we don't want to talk to them anymore, but just the fact of forgiving them help us to move forward in other aspects of our life.
Yeah, it creates an expansiveness and openness. It's like wherever your heart was closed down, it's now open, so you can attract other things into your life. Good, ways to express yourself, the perfect job, a loving friends and family. It's amazing. It's just because you're unlocking that part of your heart that has been closed. And again, I teach forgiveness along with setting healthy boundaries, because you don't want to unlock it and then get completely hurt again, especially by the same person or the same person in a different body, So that's why you want to have those healthy boundaries as well.
Yeah, and I guess that you don't want neither that you forgive in a very non-healthy way, and then you attract somebody else that will help teach you the same lesson, and you have to anyway.
Right. I always suggest to people who have been in a love relationship that went awry to really spend time alone working your process before you go right into another relationship, because being in a relationship you can really heal some things, but you want to fill yourself up and love yourself, and so that you can attract someone else who feels whole and complete, instead of this person's going to complete me. That's not a good recipe for success.
No, and I just want to say something I heard from Lisa Nichols, from The Secret.
Yeah,
and she always says, fill your cup until it's full, and then the overflow that goes in the saucer, give it to other people.
Yes, and I believe you have to fill yourself up first, because otherwise, there are so many people who give and give and give and give, but then they feel completely depleted, and that can sometimes turn into resentment. It can be feeling like a martyr, like people aren't giving in return. So that's why it's so important to fill yourself up first. Kind of like on an airplane where you have to take the oxygen first before you can help another person. You really have to keep restoring your balance and the loving and the caring and the self-nurturing.
Yeah. But it's all going back to how we take care of ourselves, in fact.
Yeah.
And it's all how we see ourselves and how we take care of who we are and how we are worthy of having all of this. Yeah.
Yes, it is. It's all about self-love. It's all about knowing who you are, having compassion for yourself. And the thing is, to the point of how much you can love yourself is how much you can love someone else. How much compassion you can have for yourself is how much compassion you can have for someone else. So you can say, I'm such a loving person, look how much I give. But the truth is, if you don't truly love yourself, you're giving a portion of yourself. Imagine how much more you can give if you feel filled up. So that's why it's so important to love yourself and to be kind to yourself. And, part of that is giving yourself time you need. Meditating, slowing things down so you're not always about what's important for other people. It's not selfish. It's self-care, I think, when you're really saying, well, what do I need today, to make this a beautiful day versus, okay, let me do something for someone else. I think you have to, because the more you love yourself, the more you can bring that loving to other people too.
Yeah, and I know this because this is exactly how I was living before. I was just giving. But then I was feeling so empty because I was expecting something back, and then I was demanding it back instead of allowing people to give it.
Right. It's something that goes it's like people don't, it's like there are so many people who are so giving but you have to be so conscious of where you're giving from. Are you giving out of a need, a neediness, or are you giving because you're so filled with love that cup is runneth over, and you're giving from that place? That is the most beautiful place to give from. And if it means pulling back and not giving so much because you need time to restore your own your own balance, that's better, because then the resentment doesn't build up. It's an amazing process when you get conscious.
Yeah, and it's going back to giving by fear, always fear, because I need to give this because else this person will not love me anymore, so I need to give it. Or is it giving by faith and saying, okay, I give this because I just have so much love for this person, and no matter if he or she will give something back to me, it doesn't matter, I want to give. Yeah.
Right, and sometimes it's fear and sometimes it's control, which also comes from fear. Like, people give to manipulate, but that again comes from fear. Like, I'm not enough, so I have to give in order to get back, instead of taking responsibility for that, actually realizing that that's a big step, just realizing that you might not be giving from the purest place. And you might not even have to change your actions. You can still give. It's just inwardly you're coming from a place of abundance that you don't need anything from the other person. Because I find also in life, and I do a lot of service work, but is that sometimes you're giving so much over here, but then over here is where you get something amazing. It's not linear give and take. But it's so beautiful. It is like spiritual law that if you give, you'll get. But from in a completely different way, possibly. It's great.
Yeah, and that's the most important thing, is that we receive. It's exactly this. We receive what we are vibrating. We receive what we are giving, and if you are vibrating self-unlove or self-hatred, we will receive this back. However, whatever it is.
Yeah. It's like you get feedback from the universe. You really do. When things don't work, it's like, oh, what is that about? And if you start looking at that and doing a process or working your process, moving into forgiveness or self-love, it's amazing how then the outer world changes. You get more opportunities and things like that. And the tricky part is not being attached to that, because you're really just doing the work without attachment, because then there's that whole other thing of, if you're attached to a certain result, even being conscious, then that's a whole nother lesson. You might not get what you wanted because you're attached to it. So it's like letting go of that as well.
But it's exactly the same thing. I know it's not the same thing, but it's the same analogy as giving by fear, giving to control. It's exactly the same thing as doing this, being attached. I want to control the outcome.
Well, and that's really interesting with the whole law of attraction debate too, then, because it's like, learning, like, well, what's the difference between, well, I want this, so I'm going to do this, and then, but you don't get it. It's, there's things about the law of attraction, or how it came out in The Secret and stuff. There's so much wonderful stuff in it, but then there's that other step, which is, and you can't be attached. You you can kind of want that and then completely don't be attached. And certainly, don't be attached to a timeline and things like that. And again, if you don't receive what you had wanted to get, saying, okay, well, that means, and really knowing in your heart that it means that wasn't for the highest good, that there's something else that you might not even see if you had received what you wanted or what you thought you wanted.
Mm-hmm. Completely, yeah. So, if you go back to forgiveness and the fact of feeling free and have the freedom to move forward in your life, would you say that once you're feeling stuck in your life and you don't get what you want in your life, and you feel that you're just in this place where you're a victim of what's happening around you, that forgiving is one step that you really need to find what you need and who you need to forgive, whether it's somebody in your family, yourself, or even the government. Why not? Oh yeah.
I've done workshops where someone and a participant will say, I don't have any forgiveness work to do about anyone in my life, but the government is doing this and that. And I say, that's interesting, because I believe it's all related. And oftentimes I find that it's this righteousness about the government. And that's an easy thing, whether people in this country, Republican or Democrat, they're going to be so angry about the other side. But that is a righteousness they hold on to. And I would be surprised if it doesn't show up in other personal relationships or work or something like that. Because, again, in this righteousness, it's again, it's like I understand discernment. I don't agree with this. I like this. I don't like that. But it's this energy of right and wrong that hurts a person. So if they can look inside and say, well, what's that righteousness about? And the way I'm using it, it's like, triggered. You're more upset about the situation than it appears you should be. And the other thing that's in common is there's a helplessness. You're so angry about this, and yet there's nothing you can do about it. And yet somehow being angry is a false sense of power. But that's not being imbalanced.
What you were saying here, it's a full affirmation or incantation that you were doing really. It's like a prayer. You were forgiving yourself and forgiving other people. And can you repeat it just because it seemed that you were really doing this?
I have an ebook. I wrote all of the steps down because I was speaking several years ago, and I realized there's no way for people to continue to do this work. So it's very important in my teaching, and I got this from the University of Santa Monica, that I'm forgiving the judgments. I'm not forgiving the thing. I believe there's nothing to forgive ultimately, but a way in is to forgive the judgments. So in the case with the government, it could be I forgive myself for judging myself. I forgive myself for judging myself as not being active enough to make a change. I forgive myself for judging the government as wrong. I forgive myself for judging the system as did I say criminal came out for some reason. But whatever comes forward, identifying those judgments and then forgiving them in that way, semantically. I forgive myself for judging myself as. I forgive myself for judging so-and-so as. And then eventually, not automatically, but eventually reframing it. The truth is that I'd like to do more. The truth is that if I knew better, I would have done better. The truth is that I have anger and I'm going to look at where that started from, but you don't want to rush into reframing because otherwise unconsciously you'll be, rebelling against it. So that's a way in. And so I have 3 steps in my forgiveness process, and that is during the second step of it. The first step is moving out of denial. And during that phase, you want to actually get angry and get, accept what is and how horrible it is. And you want to get righteous because you got to let that out. And then in the second step, you actually want to give up your need to be right. And partly how you do that is forgiving judgments.
Mm-hmm. Forgiving judgments. That really, really seems to be very, very powerful. But sometimes it is looking back of all the things that you didn't have the courage to do.
Right. So what's so important is that you forgive yourself at the same time. Because that's what happened with my brother. I actually went into deep remorse when I realized how judgmental I was of him, too. I went into deep remorse of how could I have closed my heart down that much? How could I have done this? How could I have done that? And then I had to go into, I forgive myself for judging myself as everything I judged him as. I forgive myself for judging myself as cold-hearted. Hours of self-forgiveness, really loving myself and saying I was doing the best I could. It's really important,
Yeah, I get this, yeah. And how does it feel once you really are feeling this forgiveness going, and you're forgiving somebody in your life that has been holding you back without, it's not their fault, I'm saying, but energetically holding you back.
You think they are. You think they are.
Or that you allow this energy to hold you back.
Right.
How does this really feel once you allow this and this is moving away from you?
It is so amazing. I'll tell you with my father, the king of who was holding me back. Oh my gosh, when I truly forgave him, I remember I wrote this poem and I recognized the oneness in my father and me for the first time. And I hated him so much for what he did, and I buried my love for him. And then when I realized that we're one, and especially with a parent, if I hate my parent, that means I'm hating a part of me, my very creation, because he created me energetically. Then, that's why that's an important thing I teach about letting go of that anger towards your parents. When I recognized the oneness of us, I then created a ceremony, and I went to the top of a mountain, and, I really did a ceremony of release, kind of like a burial. And energetically, something just completely lifted from me. It was amazing. It's like the energy of anger and unforgiveness is so contracted, and then the energy of forgiveness is just like, and now it's like, and when I think of him, and he did die in 2004, but when I think of him, I just think of embracing the good parts of him and just letting go of the other stuff. It's truly remarkable. I mean, I can say with my father, I've absolutely forgiven him. With my aunt, I'm still working on it. I know I am. And the reason I know I am is because I don't fully think, oh, I wish the best for her. I don't, not yet, but I want to, because I know that is my own prison sentence. I want to wish her the best. That's my intention.
Yeah, you want to do this, and then the same thing maybe with some people of my life is that when I know that I still need to forgive them, because sometimes when I catch myself, it's not always. It's just in my head, this thing is spinning, and it's going to go over the same story again and again and again and again. But it's just taking over without me knowing this.
Right. That's why it's so important to do that kind of thing where you maybe bring a picture out of the person, or even write that story out, or something that you could bring to consciousness. Actually think about it consciously every day so that it won't rear its ugly head, when you don't expect it to. It's amazing how much control we actually can have when we do that, because you bring it to your consciousness. Apply loving. If you can't apply any gratitude for that situation, think of something lovely. I always think of my dog's face because I love her so much. Just change it. And if you're going into that obsessive thinking, just change it and think of something you love. Think of your daughter's face. Think of a beautiful sunset. It can change it. That's the easy thing. You don't have to actually do all the judgment work in that moment. You can just shift to something beautiful.
Yeah, and that's quite amazing. And how did all this work allowed you to become more who you are, yourself? Because I think that your acting is yourself. That's one aspect of you. You're probably a very good mom also, that now can really give to your children what they desire, and also a woman that is fulfilled, I guess, now.
A what?
A woman that is fulfilled.
Oh yes. Oh yeah. Well, it's so funny you talk about being a mom, because I mentor a foster child, and I just love him so much. I feel like I am, we would like to adopt him. That's definitely in the future. And I feel like I can be such a good mom in that I can be honest and authentic and talk with him, and I have so much loving available, versus when I was all closed down and fearful and not trusting. So in that way, and then with my show, it's like I'm fully expressing myself when I do the show, and in a way where I'm not creating villains, but creating a story. And so being able to see other perspectives is amazing, so it's been great.
It's amazing once we are in peace with ourselves, and once we have some freedom, and once we are able to respond to life, that we can address with children or whoever the deepest issues, and we know that we have our power here, because we know that we have nothing that is here holding us back.
Well, and we're being authentic. You can't go wrong being authentic. And it's getting to know what voice is speaking. Is it the authentic voice, or is it your ego? And when doing this work helps me realize when it's my ego, and if it is, it's like, thanks for sharing, see ya. And when it's my voice, and that voice always leads me in the right direction. The most balanced direction, the most loving direction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I get this, yeah. And it's kind of funny, because sometimes I go to yoga and I can feel this ball of energy coming up, And at the start, I was kind of repressing it and saying, okay, I don't want this anymore. But now I'm saying, oh, thank you very much, because you helped me either to relate to my family, or either doing this or doing that. And then I let it go, and it's just amazing.
Isn't it amazing? Yeah, that you can just let it go. You don't want to suppress it, because if you suppress it, it gets bigger. You know? It'll come and get you. So, you know, a lot of addictions, I think, are from that. You know, people trying to stop those voices, instead of the key is really to go through it with loving. Yeah.
Completely. So Brenda, our time is up now, and it was great having you here. So if people want to get in contact with you or see your show, you're still touring with your shows around? Or?
Yeah, I'm doing my show Father's Day weekend here in the States.
Which is, sorry, because every Father's Day is different in the world.
Well, I'm doing this show the day before Father's Day, so that's June 18th in Oklahoma City, and then I'm doing a workshop on how to forgive your father's betrayal and my 3-step forgiveness process on that Monday, June 20th in Oklahoma City, Unity Church. And my website is forgivenessandfreedom.com, spelled out forgiveness, A-N-D, freedom.com. And my book is at forgiveandbefreebook.com. That has my 3-step process in it, and that's it. I have a free e-course on my website at forgivenessandfreedom.com too.
So I will put all these details on everything where either this video or either this interview will be spread, so people will find it. And so, do you have plans to do your show later this year also, or?
The next booking that I have on my books is in Michigan in March 3rd and 4th at the Jewish Ensemble Theater. That's the next one I have on the books, and I'm submitting it to other places and hoping to do a regular show. Love to come to Ireland. I've done the show in London, and I did the show in Vienna, and I did the show in Leeds. So I would love to go to other English-speaking countries as well, spreading this message. So,
we could organize something for Ireland and even some to Canada, because I have good contacts over there. So you never know.
That'd be great. Great, yeah.
That would be great. Yeah. If people want just to know, it's on your website. You will have any forthcoming event or any forthcoming.
Yes, I'll have it on my website, and if they do sign up for that free 5-part e-course on it's the 5 top reasons to never forgive and why you must, then they'll be on my e-zine list. So about twice a month I send out a newsletter and over the internet, and then that has everything that I answer questions there, and I keep people up to date with where I'll be performing.
Okay, so thank you very much, Brenda, for being here. It was really great.
Thank you. All right,
I really enjoyed this. Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye.
He always had a Cuban cigar dripping from his mouth 24/7. A wad of $100 bills in his pocket, and a .38 caliber Smith & Wesson snub-nosed gun either under his pillow in my parents' bedroom or somewhere on his person. A family that shoots together stays together. Right, Brenda? Right, Dad? A family that shoots together stays together. Right, Mom? Mom? Boom! Brenda, an actor has dropped out, and we need another naked dead body for 2 scenes. What would happen to my soul if I took my own life? I don't care that you're speaking to him on the front lawn. I want to speak to my father now. I know you're the mother, but give me the keys! Who do you think made the money anyway? You have to have a menage a trois. Let me go ask Sherry. I don't speak Italian either. Maybe it's a pasta. Come on. Come on. You guys are disgusting. Could you go upstairs to your bedroom and lock the door? Can I forgive Daddy, or should I hold on to this anger forever? He got a silencer for his gun. Married with mine aunt, my mother's sister? Right here and now, I choose to open my heart again.